He once wrote "Candle in the Wind," the best-selling single in history, as a tribute to Princess Diana. On stage, he was a dazzling icon admired by millions around the world. But few people know that this same man was once turned away by the very industry that had embraced him simply because he chose to live openly and truthfully about who he was. He never argued. He never offered excuses. Today, Elton John lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Beverly Hills, surrounded by a rare collection of eyeglasses so unique that only he would dare to wear them, and a garage filled with cars, each tied to a chapter of his life story. A life filled with brilliance not for show, but as a way to honor a journey marked by setbacks and the courage to rise again in his own way. Join us as we explore the life behind the spotlight and the heart behind the title of Living Legend, The Extraordinary Journey of Elton John. If you enjoy videos like this, please remember to hit the like button. It helps us more than you know, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Can music save a boy from a wounded childhood? Before the world knew the name Elton John, he was simply Reginald Kenneth Dwight, a young boy growing up in a small house in Pinner, a quiet suburb outside London. In the chilly kitchen of that modest home during the damp, endless rains of 1950s England, Reg found his only comfort sitting at his grandmother's old, upright piano. His father Stanley was an officer in the Royal Air Force, a reserved, strict man who never encouraged anything that strayed from convention. Whenever Reg would play, his father would interrupt with a soft but weighty remark, "That's fine, but don't let music become a waste of time." His mother Sheila, however, was the first to recognize her son's natural gift. She would bring home rock and roll records and encourage him to mimic Elvis Presley and Bill Haley. By the age of 4, Reg could replay a melody after hearing it just once. And by 7, he had begun formal piano lessons. The defining moment came at 11 when Reg auditioned for the Royal Academy of Music. During the ear-training exam, asked to replay a complex piece after a single listen, he left the judges speechless. He earned a prestigious junior scholarship. But that evening, when he proudly shared the news, his father simply sat in silence and then asked, "What do you plan to do with all that?" There was no anger in the question, but it carried enough weight to make a dreaming child feel he had stepped off the proper path. In his heart, Reg began to understand if he wanted to pursue music, he would have to find his own way. At 14, his parents divorced. No explanations. No goodbyes. From that moment on, Reg threw himself into music even more, as if it was the only way he could stay steady in a world that seemed to change without warning. And the first light on that long journey came from an unexpected figure, his stepfather, Fred Fairbrother. Fred wasn't a man of many words. He simply showed up, quietly taking Reg to live music performances on the weekends. One evening, after hearing Reg pound out a rock tune with both hands, Fred smiled and said, "Just keep playing, Reg. Keep going." And he did. From that small house in Pinner Reginald, Kenneth Dwight began the journey that would one day make him Elton John. What would make a 17-year-old boy dare to leave school to live for music in the 1960s? For Reginald Kenneth Dwight, the answer was simple: music was the only thing that made him feel truly alive. When the recordings of Elvis Presley or Jerry Lee Lewis crackled through the old family radio, Reg didn't just hear music, he felt it. He replayed melodies by ear, memorizing every blues riff and rhythm. It wasn't just youthful dreaming, it was a calling. At 17, Reg quietly decided to leave school. No shouting. No arguments. One evening, he simply told his mother he was going to pursue music seriously. And Sheila didn't stop him. Reg began playing piano in smoky nightclubs where the clinking of glasses often drowned out the music. He joined a band called Bluesology, performing in late-night clubs where few patrons even noticed who was on stage. But Reg noticed everything: the way the spotlight hit the singer's hands, the way the crowd swayed to the rhythm. Music was his classroom. He eventually landed a job at Dick James Music, writing songs for other artists for a modest salary. His early compositions were often heavily edited, and sometimes he was told, "It's fine, but it won't sell." Reg didn't lose heart. He adapted. He chose a new name for himself, Elton John. And then fate stepped in. He met Bernie Taupin, a young lyricist with a raw, sensitive voice. Elton and Bernie quickly became inseparable collaborators. They worked tirelessly, sending out dozens of demo tapes, most of which disappeared into silence. Then one afternoon, they wrote a simple, heartfelt song called Your Song. No gimmicks, no grandstanding, just a few honest lines. How wonderful life is while you're in the world. When the song first played on the radio, Elton was sitting in his modest apartment. He turned up the volume, listened, and cried. For the first time, the world heard the name Elton John through his own voice, through his own heart. Your Song soon climbed into the top 10 in America. The Elton John album brought him onto grand stages under dazzling lights in sold-out theaters. He began receiving invitations to perform everywhere from tiny London clubs to massive concert halls in New York. But the road was not without challenges. His flamboyant stage presence, colored glasses, sparkling capes, platform shoes, sparked harsh criticism from many newspapers. Is he really singing or just trying to get attention? Elton didn't argue. He focused on the music. He formed his own band, the Elton John Band, and kept creating performances no one could forget. From the dim light of a small desk where he first wrote songs, Elton John now stood before roaring crowds, hailed as a true artist. After his first show in America, it's said that Elton used his first paycheck not to buy a car, not to buy clothes, but to send money home to his mother. The boy, once dismissed as someone who couldn't sell, had begun writing a new chapter in British music, fueled by belief, individuality, and a passion that never faded. How does a boy who once played piano in a cramped apartment in Pinner become the owner of multi-million-dollar estates across Europe and America? After Your Song, Elton John's career exploded like fireworks across the musical sky of the 1970s. He didn't just become a star, he became a phenomenon. Within less than a decade, he released a series of landmark albums like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Captain Fantastic and The Brown Dirt Cowboy, selling over 300 million records worldwide. The awards came one after another: 5 Grammys, 2 Oscars, 2 Golden Globes, and eventually the rare EGOT title, an achievement claimed by only a handful of artists in history. With fame came a life designed like a dream. In 2012, Elton and his longtime partner David Furnish purchased a home in Trousdale Estates, Beverly Hills for $2 million. From the outside, the house exudes a simple, understated elegance: clean lines, white walls, and manicured gardens. But step through the large glass doors, and an explosion of color and artistry greets you, a world that is unmistakably Elton. The main living room features a David LaChapelle portrait alongside bold contemporary pieces by Andy Warhol and others. Sunlight pours through the windows, bouncing off polished hardwood floors and 1970s-inspired furnishings. Near the window sits a grand piano where Elton often plays a soft tune on weekend mornings. This isn't a space meant to impress. It's a space meant to remember the years lived, the songs sung, the loves cherished. Not far from Windsor Castle, Elton owns an old estate on a 34-acre property in Old Windsor, a personal piece of history he never wanted to leave behind. Its classically English wrought iron gates, rose gardens blooming with the seasoned stone pathways winding through lush lawns toward the main house. This isn't a home for show. It's a retreat after long tours, a place where Elton plays piano at dawn, raises beloved dogs, and writes music in a room overlooking the gardens. Every wooden beam and every window frame seems to breathe the calm of another era. In a world that never stops moving, this is the one place where he allows himself to pause. On the hillsides of Nice in the south of France, Elton found what he calls quiet light. His 1920s villa overlooks the Mediterranean Sea, its red-tiled roof nestled among olive tree knolls and lavender fields. Every summer, Elton and his family retreat there, mornings spent reading on the terrace, afternoons at the piano, evenings dining under soft garden lights. There are no flashy gadgets here, only shelves lined with vinyl records, an old stereo system, and small paintings collected from travels abroad. This home isn't just a property, it's a reflection of Elton's spirit, thoughtful, contemplative, yet warmly embracing life. Unlike many celebrities who collect cars for display, Elton John treats each car as a living memory engine attached to moments in time, not trapped behind glass, but part of the journey itself. One of the first cars he bought after the success of Your Song was a 1973 Rolls-Royce Phantom Sleek Black, with the spirit of ecstasy gleaming proudly up front and handcrafted brown leather interiors. Today, its value is estimated at over $450,000, but to Elton, the real worth lies elsewhere. It was the car that carried him away from his first New York performance, as he sat quietly in the back seat, watching the city lights blur past, humming a tune yet to be finished. In the garage at Old Windsor, Elton also keeps a 1985 Bentley Continental convertible in classic ivory cream worth around $250,000, often used for countryside drives or peaceful Sunday mornings with David and their two sons. No roaring engines. No races for attention. That Bentley is more like a ballad on wheels, gentle, timeless, and reflective, just like the way Elton approaches his later years. Elton once also owned a Ferrari Testarossa and an Aston Martin V8 Vantage Volante, some specially ordered in colors matching his stage designs. One notable piece was a shimmering pink Ferrari used during the Yellow Brick Road tour, valued at over $200,000 at the time. These weren't mere vehicles, they were living props woven into his real-life story. Each car marks a chapter, a new album, a sold-out tour, a private moment worth remembering. But unlike collections locked away behind velvet ropes, Elton's cars were never just stored. He drove them. He lived with them. And through them, he carried pieces of his story down every road he traveled. If music was how Elton John told his story through sound, then the objects he surrounds himself with are how he preserves each chapter through imagery, not to boast, but to remember, to relive, and to carry forward. Eyewear, a signature of style, a window into his soul. You can't talk about Elton John without mentioning his glasses. He owns over 250,000 pairs, enough to wear a different pair every day for nearly 700 years. But behind that staggering number lies a world of self-expression, heart-shaped frames encrusted with crystals, round Lennon-inspired lenses, color-coordinated designs for every tour, and custom creations worn just once on stage. Some pieces in his collection are worth millions. One single Versace crystal-studded pair worn at Madison Square Garden was valued near $15,000. But Elton never cared about the price tag. Each pair tells a story, a memory of a day, a feeling, a silent conversation with the world. Art when walls become a gallery of the heart. Since the early 1980s, Elton has been a serious art collector, not chasing trends, but choosing works that stirred something deep inside him at first sight. His collection has included original pieces by Andy Warhol, Basquiat, Keith Haring, and photography by Robert Mapplethorpe, as well as contemporary works from young artists he quietly supported. At one point, his private collection was valued at over $200 million. In 2024, he surprised the art world by auctioning off over 900 pieces, not to distance himself from art, but to simplify his living space. But Elton didn't abandon the world of art. Instead, he kept the pieces closest to his heart, black and white portraits of old friends, sketches picked up on Asian tours, and a child's crayon drawing labeled simply Dad's Song. In Elton John's world, every possession has a soul. Eyewear paintings, photographs, they're not locked behind museum glass. They live with him, breathing through every room, every year, every memory. This isn't just a collection. It's a life told in images. When the world turned its back on him for speaking the truth, what gave Elton John the strength to keep stepping onto the stage? In 1976, Elton John shook the public when he openly shared in an interview with Rolling Stone that he could love both men and women. At that time in the Western world, and especially within an entertainment industry still clinging to old prejudices, such honesty was seen as daring, even dangerous. Some business partners walked away. The media scrutinized his every move. But Elton didn't fire back. He didn't call for a press conference. Instead, he kept performing, night after night, song after song. Under every spotlight, he sang not to answer the tabloids, but to affirm, "I am still here. And I am still me." By the late 1980s, another storm arrived. The Sun, one of Britain's biggest tabloids, ran a series of false and sensational stories about Elton's private life. They tied his name to extravagant parties, unfounded rumors, and scandalous gossip without evidence. Elton sued, and he won. Yet after his legal victory, he didn't celebrate publicly. He quietly returned to the studio and recorded a melancholy ballad called Blue Avenue, a song that never topped the charts but carried the weight of someone weary from battles he never sought. That victory wasn't just about clearing his name, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. After years of battling addictions to alcohol and drugs, Elton made the decision to get sober in 1990. Along that journey, he witnessed the loss of dear friends, including Freddie Mercury, to the AIDS epidemic. Out of that grief, he founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation, a cause that has since touched the lives of millions around the world. Years later, when asked about the criticism directed at his lavish lifestyle, from million-dollar mansions to classic cars to a collection of thousands of pairs of eyeglasses, Elton answered simply, "I was once a kid who had nothing. Everything I have today is proof that dreams, if they are real enough, can come true." It wasn't a rebuttal. It wasn't a defense. It was simply the way he chose to live, without noise, without excuses. All he ever needed was a piano, a stage, and the unshakable belief that music could heal everything. Behind the stage lights, what inspired Elton John to dedicate his life to saving millions. In the early 1990s, while much of the world was still gripped by fear and stigma surrounding AIDS, Elton John watched as friend after friend slipped away, not just because of the disease, but because of the silence that surrounded it. One day, he visited a small hospital in London, where AIDS patients lay quietly abandoned by family without anyone to speak for them. A young man, frail and skeletal, reached out, took Elton's hand and asked, "They'll forget about us, won't they?" Elton leaned down, unable to speak. But that day he made a promise not just to that young man, but to everyone who no longer had a voice. In 1992, he founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation, at first a modest organization, but one that has since supported over 5 million people across more than 90 countries. Elton didn't remain behind a desk. He stood shoulder to shoulder with patients funding medications, providing counseling support, and working tirelessly to dismantle the stigma that had shadowed the disease for decades. He never saw it as a duty. He saw it as an act of love. But he didn't stop there. Elton has used his fame to open doors for future generations. A portion of the profits from his Farewell Yellow Brick Road Tour has been directed toward music scholarship programs. He has championed LGBTQ+ organizations, fought publicly for marriage equality, and appeared in countless public campaigns, not as a celebrity asking for approval, but as a man living his truth without apology or compromise. And when people speak of his legacy, they don't just mention the hundreds of songs from Rocket Man to Tiny Dancer, from dazzling world tours to Candle in the Wind, the tribute to Princess Diana that remains the best-selling single of all time. Each melody is a reflection of an era. Each lyric carries a piece of his heart. No one would have imagined that the poor boy named Reginald, growing up in a public housing flat in Pinner, would one day build a musical empire and become one of the most influential humanitarian figures in the world. But Elton John did it not through strategy, but through an unshakable belief that he could still give back after everything he had been given. His true legacy isn't found on the Grammy walls. It lives in every life he helped save. And what about you? What have you overcome? Who have you wanted to help in your own way? Share your story in the comments below. Because sometimes even the smallest act can change an entire life.